Hi, this is Trash Dev. I'm Tapioca. This is episode 4 of my series about developing Lakeside, a fishing adventure RPG. In the last video, I created most of the basics for the fishing gameplay, and spent way too long explaining why I chose to make it the way I did. It's been a while since then, and I sort of got distracted and haven't been working on the game that much. In this video, I'm going to show what I was working on before I fell off, and what I've been doing since I got back. My plan was to take care of some of the things on my to-do list, which looked like this. I sorted the things that seemed easy to do at the top, and everything else got put into sections at the bottom where I can easily ignore them forever. I ended up doing everything from the top section, and while NPC wandering was the most complex task by far, each thing ended up being its own little side quest that I want to get into. Let's start with the text boxes. In the original Lakeside from 2016, text boxes slide in like this, which I think looks really good. Right now, the text boxes in my game just appear, and it can be a bit jarring. I probably don't want every text box to slide down, but I definitely want all the ones that can be used as character dialogue to do it, and probably just all the ones in the player-facing parts of the engine in general. Before I go any further, I need to quickly explain how the scripting works. When you talk to an NPC, its assigned Lua script is called. The script can enact change in the game however it wants, but to power things like cutscenes and dialogue where things happen one after another in order, it has to create script nodes. A script node is a basic unit of cutscene, and it can be pushing a UI element, or a character walking somewhere, or a music change, or anything else. In the case of text boxes, each individual text box is a UI script node that creates the text box. The script nodes are assembled into a chain and returned to the engine, where they're processed in order. I promise this will become important later in the video. This was my first attempt at the slide down. Creating the animation was simple enough, but the problem is that every text box is doing it, which looks terrible. Since every text box is its own unique thing, the animation is applied to all of them, and they all slide down. To fix this, I tried combining a series of text boxes together into one UI element, then only applying the animation to the beginning of the series. This still looks bad though, because a series of text boxes can be broken up by something like a movement node, or a sound effect, or even a logic branch that's invisible to the player. That would mean there's still 2 text box script nodes, which means 2 slide animations. My next attempt was to insert the slide down animation at the time when the nodes are linked together and queued up, which is a function called makeChain. At this time, I could find the true first text box in the chain, put the slide animation on it, and all the rest in the script would appear normally. This also doesn't work, and the reason why is because one cutscene as it appears to the player is actually multiple chains. In the example cutscene I've been showing, when the player has to select between whether or not to say howdy, the result of saying yes or no is an entirely new chain from what was being executed before. This means that an unwanted second slide down happens on the text box after making the decision. There are ways I could redesign how scripts are executed so that the entire chain is pre-built, branches and all, but I kind of like how scripts are written right now, and what I've realized throughout this process is that I actually don't want one automated solution for all text boxes. I want the freedom to sometimes have a cutscene start on a text box that doesn't slide down, which gives the effect of a sudden sound, like a character yelling from a distance. So I'm just gonna manually set whether or not each text box slides down, and hopefully future Tapioca doesn't hate me too much for the extra boolean attached to writing every line of text. Right now, when you pick a place to fish, the bobber just appears on the tile. This isn't good enough, there needs to be some kind of line cast animation. I can think of a few ideas for this, but they all require a bunch of art assets, which I can't really do right now. I think it'll look good if the bobber gets thrown to the tile, kind of like in Stardew Valley. I also want the bobber to move around a little once it's in the water instead of being so static. When a fish bites, it should sink underwater. Attempt number 1. I converted the bobber from a basic texture to an entity, like the player or NPCs, so that I can animate it and have more robust control over its movement. I tried using the raw movement queue function that already exists for entities, but this adheres strictly to the tile grid, so it looks completely ridiculous. I also put together a basic animation sheet for the bobber so it drifts around on the water, but it looks like total garbage. The sinking animation is good though. Attempt number 2. I created an elaborate system for queuing really raw movements on entities that works by pixel instead of sticking to the grid. I didn't take any pictures of the code because I was going to clean it up after confirming it worked, but the end result looked so bad that I just deleted it all out of shame. It is working. The bobber moves in a straight line from the player to the targeted water tile, but that just doesn't look like a throw. For attempt number 3, I'm going to make the bobber its own subclass of entity so that I can contain all the code for the throw. I want the bobber to be thrown in an arc towards the destination tile, not just a straight line. My plan is to have the bobber calculate its movement in a straight line, but then add some amount to its y-coordinate to create the arc. I suck at math, so here's my code, feel free to pause and laugh at me. I basically have this function that looks like an arc, then scale it to the length the bobber has to travel, and pick the appropriate point on the curve to add to the raw bobber position on the straight line. And hey, this actually looks pretty decent. The movement's jittery, and I'm not really sure why, but you can see the arc happening no matter where I throw it, and it really looks like it's being thrown. I think the jitter is something I can fix in the future. This is good enough for now. I'm gonna leave the bad idle animation for later too, that's just an art asset issue. In the fishing minigame itself, when you pick an action to play against the fish, I want some kind of animation here. Right now, you can't even tell there are options, or that this is even an interactive UI element at all. I envision a sort of roulette here, where you press left and right to cycle between cards, and they rotate around in a circle with the selected card at the front. The main gameplay concern is that the animation needs to be quick so the cards feel responsive. Surprisingly, this was actually the easiest thing to do on the list by far. Aside from this one bug where I had swapped some numbers around in the trigonometry wrong, everything pretty much worked first try. The bug was even helpful too, because seeing how weird the movement is gave me some good ideas for the gameplay. I'm going to leave things like this for now, but I might also change the fish's card into a roulette and then have it spin automatically, though it would be harder to hide my code manually setting the outcome this way. Maybe the cards should be flipped backwards, then revealed on the player's input, but that would lead most players to just assume the fish is cheating, I think. And it is cheating, but I don't want it to be so obvious. To give some life to the maps, I want NPCs to be able to wander around freely, independent of the player's actions. The first step is to give each NPC a movement range, so that I can define how far they're allowed to stray from their origin. I could get fancy and give each NPC a set of tiles it's allowed to walk on, which would be slightly better in some cases, but I'm not going to do that because adding that feature to the editor would be a nightmare. After that, it's as simple as updating the NPC class's update method to make moves from time to time. Also, I had to change collision detection to consider an entity's previous tile as well as their future one during movement to prevent NPCs and players from walking onto the same tile at the same time. Previously, an entity's position was whichever tile its upper left corner was in, so if they tried moving to the right, their position wouldn't be updated to reflect their new tile until the very end of the move. This was fine when all NPCs were static and only the player moved, but if an NPC randomly walks to the right at the same time the player tries moving into the same tile, the tile would still be considered unoccupied and both the player and the NPC would move into it. Here's my first test of NPC wandering. At first, it actually looks like it's working perfectly, but in reality there are 5 bugs. 1. NPCs can still wander during cutscenes, which means this guy who's supposed to walk up and talk to me instead just completely walks away. 2. Trying to start a script that moves an NPC while that NPC is already moving will cause them to misalign with the grid and crash the game. 3. Pathfinding for NPCs and scripts is calculated as soon as the script is first executed, which means if an NPC wanders between that time and the time the move actually happens, the computed path will be wrong and the NPC ends up in a completely wrong place. 4. NPC wandering isn't disabled when setting them as a follower, so an NPC following the player quickly becomes disjointed. 5. NPCs can randomly wander into a stationary player. This is because all that collision stuff about entities I was just talking about only actually checks a list of NPCs, and the player is handled separately and is essentially invisible. Bugs 1 and 2 were both fixed at the same time by creating a reserve and release system for scripts. At the start of a script, I can create a reserve node that disables the random movement of an NPC, essentially reserving them for that cutscene. The reserve node also pauses the script until the reserved NPC is finished moving to prevent any misalignment. At the end of a script, I put a release node that releases any previously reserved NPCs, so they start wandering again. I think this is the only way to fix the problem, because I don't want to blanket disable wandering for every NPC during script execution, but there's also no easy way to analyze a script and automatically tell which NPCs are going to be needed. Between this and the manual text box slide animation I worked on earlier, I think I've added a lot of extra complexity to the scripting system that's going to lead to a lot of problems down the line. Next, I fixed bug number 3 by placing pathfinding into its own script node. This way, the path isn't actually computed until the exact moment it's time to start the move. Bug number 4 is a simple one. I just have a variable set when making an NPC a follower that disables their wandering. Finally, bug number 5. I just had to move the collision detection code out of the map and into the world, which gave it access to the list of all entities, including the player. This also let me fix secret bug number 6, which is that entities could pass through other entities when pathfinding in a script. I never saw this happen, but it definitely could. And with that, everything should be working okay. I let a couple NPCs run around in this small room for a little while to see if anything weird would happen, and they all behave like they're supposed to, so I think that means we're done here. Oh, I put that on the list, didn't I? Okay, there, perfect. Anyway, that's what I've been working on for the last 2 months. Really, that was only about a week or two's worth of work total, but I took a lot of time off. I'm hoping to get back into things more regularly, so ideally the next video won't take so long to come out. Now that NPC wandering works, my plan is to do some content development and actually start putting together and scripting the first town in the game. So in the next video, you'll hopefully see the result of that, and maybe I'll talk a bit about what this game's actually about. Until then, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.